Hi, everyone. Welcome to Lakshmi's Leadership Lounge. This is all about future of work. It's changing more than ever. And it's a time we evaluate the way we lead to prepare ourselves for it. So this is why we bring you a series of uh, leaders who showcase the way they're redefining how they're leading. Join me, Lakshmi Pratury, on this journey as I take a deep dive into the lives of these trailblazers and their unique take on leadership. So, for this month, we are going through the theme of building communities at scale. So, today I have with me my dear friend Virginia Sharma. She's the Vice President of Brand Solutions at JioSaavn. And it's a very powerful streaming platform for South Asian music as well as audio entertainment. And she spearheads the company's global digital and efforts across platforms and responsible for driving adoption to JioSaavn's advertising solutions for brands. Now, the thing about Virginia is that she has done many things in her life as a leader. She has worked in US, Singapore, Japan, India, and she also worked with large companies like IBM and LinkedIn. And she brings over 20 years of experience in leading marketing and sales teams. So you'll learn more about her as we talk. So, with that, I'd like to bring Virginia to join us.
Hi,
Hi,
Lakshmi. Thank you for
Virginia.
having me.
Yes, of course. So let's have a nice chat this morning, my time, evening, your time, night, somewhere else. We are in a global scenario where it is some time for somebody somewhere. So, you should know most about this because you've been like one of those leaders who's had multiple roles for 15 years at IBM and then at LinkedIn. You were like a digital nomad even before there was a term called digital nomad. So, tell me a little bit about the places you have worked, and despite working everywhere else, you keep coming back to Asia. So, tell us a little bit about the draw to Asia and your life as a digital nomad so far.
Yeah. Uh, you know, um, I joke that this is my fourth innings in Asia, and I
Yeah.
have plates that have traveled to Asia more than some people have traveled to Asia because I go back to the US with my plates and then I bring them back to Asia. But yeah, no, look, I started my career in 1999 with IBM, and the funny thing is that I started as a work from home or remote employee. We were given a laptop and we were given a pager and we were given something called a token ring where you could dial
Yes,
in, right? You had to
I remember that.
choose. So you had to choose whether you would have to be on the phone or whether you'd have to be online. And
Yes.
I think that was a great experience because obviously I got many years of training of how to work as an employee, but also be a manager of people in a remote environment before Zoom and video. But through that environment, I got to interact with people all over the world early on because you can work at different time zones, etc. And I got my first break to move to Asia, a couple of years into my career. And I moved to Japan, which is probably about as Asia can get. Actually, it's about as Japanese as Asia can get. And I'd never been to Japan. But the important thing is that suddenly you realize that the world doesn't start and end with the U.S. And when you've been trained as a go to undergrad in the U.S. and there's a work ethic, you really have to recalibrate how you work in Asia in terms of relationships, in terms of how to get work done, how to relate to people. The gender relations in Asia are very, very different. Um, so I think that was a good training early on. I was not very good in my first Asian innings because I brought an American sensibility to Asia, which never works. But I think it served me well for my next three innings when I came to Singapore, when I moved to Mumbai, and now when I moved to Delhi, to
Yeah.
be a little more aligned with how to get things done here.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about in all these years, how has Asia changed you? And how have you changed?
Yeah, I mean, look, the one thing is that when you actually build for Asia, you build for multiple cultures, languages, uh, from the beginning, right? So this idea, and I always used to tell my team in the global team, when I went back to the US after doing my stint in Japan, I was
Mhm.
part of the global team, and I said, let's not build for the US and then try to scale out from there. And that's one of the mistakes that I think a lot of startups do, which is they take an American or a Western model and they think that they can kind of extend it here. I would tell them, build for Korea and then scale it to other markets, because if it works in Korea, it's going to work everywhere. You've got double byte languages and everything else, so it's much more complex to make it work.
Mhm.
And but it's going to be a lot more applicable everywhere else. So the number one thing was like my playground was no longer let's try it in Chicago, or let's try it in Detroit, or let's try it in Miami. It used to be you do, New York, San Francisco, LA, and now you start, that was the idea of trying a test market. Now my test markets were let's try it, in Indonesia, let's try it in Korea. So that's one, which is just changing my center of gravity. And the second thing that actually really changed for me is understanding how to use my dual cultures very, very well to get things done. I have the benefit of being Asian, I have the benefit of being Indian. And
Mhm.
so the ability to relate to people through your Asianness, when you have a relationship building, you understand how it is to work with people who value family, who value, I mean, the number of customers I've had who've tried to set me up with their sons or uh, sisters' sons, or, when I was younger, but taking it in stride and not being offended by it and understanding the sentiment behind it.
Yeah,
All the way to saying there's a line to say all this is fine, but I'm also an American, and there's certain professionalism, certain work ethic that I have that comes with my American training that I bring to the table. So I became very good at kind of using both both pieces. I think what I changed in Asia, honestly, is the ability to bring great habits. I think that there's something about learning to work in the US is that you really focus on processes. And, one of the most important things I learned is when you commit to something, you deliver. You don't just sort of say, I'll get it done, it'll happen. And that's one of the things about Japanese culture and Indian culture, which is like, a nod doesn't necessarily mean agreement. It means that I
correct.
understand what you said. Or in Hindi, as they say, ho jayega, kar lenge. There's sort of a gray zone of will it happen or won't it happen? And I think
Correct.
that the ability to bring some level of accountability and commitment, I think it's important. I think it builds our
Correct.
credibility in the world.
Correct. Yeah. And also, you have worked in large companies. You've been at IBM, you've been at LinkedIn, and then you decided to move to JioSaavn. So you worked in international companies in US, international companies in India, and now kind of an Indian international company in India. So what would
Yeah.
be your advice for young people who want to switch? And you've done it where you've been very solid in one company for a long time also, but you've done many roles in that company as well. So you've not been like the same job for 12 years or anything like that. So what would be your advice to young people,
I think
or
the
for
best
anybody,
advice I
for
got,
example, anyone who wants to switch?
well, I think the best advice I can give people is make at least, and this is advice I got, which is make at least 3 changes in the first 10 years of your career. Whether it be
Yeah,
changing, if you're in the same company, change location, uh, change offices, change departments, change functions, change cities. Just the ability to build that sort of agility in adjusting to different cities, different cultures, different lines of work will make you more ready for what's to come when you go into your 30s and you're faced with more change, because you're going to take it into your stride. It's not going to be as big a deal when someone says, well, the next big opportunity for you is in another market. And by then potentially in a relationship and you have things holding you back. And, you know, people always tell me, it's like, you know, you used to live there. What do you miss about that? Or what do you miss about IBM? I don't miss anything about anything because, you know, you just keep going, and everything had its moment in time and everything was good for what it was. But I don't hold on to it as I wish I could go back. If I really miss IBM enough, I'll make a couple of phone calls and try to get back there. If I really miss
Yeah.
New York enough, I'll get a flight and I'll go. But
Yeah.
the idea of impermanence is good for people. And I think
Yeah.
that change is really healthy for people in the first 10 years of their career, even if they stay in the same company.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, people say, "Oh, you worked at Intel for 12 years," and I say, "Yeah, I had, but 8 distinctly different jobs." So
Yeah.
I learned so much, and that's the advantage of being with a large company. Sometimes is that
Yeah.
you can change locations, you can change jobs, you can change divisions, you can change functions,
Yeah.
etc. The other thing is this sense of home. Virginia, on one hand, we are getting into a world where a lot of the young people say, why do I need to own any home at all? And I just will be, Airbnb it forever probably. Or maybe is it a certain time in your life when that changes? And you also talk about home and ownership. It's an integral part of Asian conditioning. How is that changing? How have you changed about it? What's home? How do you define home and ownership of home?
I mean, honestly, I think I'm probably more Asian in this than not. You know, I think that my dad made some brilliant investments in owning home. We grew up in Dubai, so we never owned our home in Dubai. And I think that that had a lasting impression on me because we uh, had a place in Mumbai, we had a place in New York, but we never had a place in the place I grew up in. And it's
Yeah.
because back then you weren't allowed to own a place. And I think what really stayed with me is when I came back one summer, our home was raised because we moved, and the place that I grew up was being, they were building some new construction, which you can do when you don't own a place. And I think that kind of had a lasting impact on me to say, I need a piece of space on this earth that I will decide when it has to go.
Mm.
Or someone has to ask me before they destroy it, I guess. And so,
Yeah.
I think that the home that I live in right now is actually an apartment across the street from my mother's. And
Mm.
these were two flats that my dad invested in almost 20 years ago. I don't know if he had any idea what would happen to him, what would happen to her, what would happen to me. But at the end of the day, it's COVID and I get to walk across the street to see my mother. So I think the idea that this grounding of, it doesn't always have to be the same home, but I do think having that anchoring has been good. Um, but on the flip side of this, I have no problems Airbnb-ing my apartment. I own a place in Sri Lanka. I have no problem others sharing that space. There's a great word in Hindi that my mom would always teach me, which is barka, which is a house that people come and go from is a
Right.
home. So if you build this beautiful house and nobody comes, then is really worth it?
Correct.
So I love having just people come, stay, go anytime, because I think that's what makes that place. And I think that that's what you want. If you have the means to own a piece of real estate in the world, own it,
Yeah.
but then open it up to everybody.
I think it's great. And I always call this idle capacity sharing, So if you have a home, a bedroom to spare or whatever, give it to your friends and, someone. And I'm traveling all across US and that's what I've been doing is, my friends who have homes that are not being used or, it's wonderful. Oh, sorry. Wonderful to do that. So, from ownership, let me move a little bit into, we are talking about, concrete things now. So, what are your success metrics as a leader?
I think for me, the ability for us to have one conversation in the organization versus two or three conversations. What I mean by that is, there's a academic term, I don't really like it, but I can't think of anything else, called psychological safety. But if your singular goal as a as a leader is to make sure everybody feels comfortable saying what's on their minds, and the ability to have one conversation across the organization, regardless of the level. It's very difficult to do in cultures like in Asia, because there is a hierarchy, there's a respect for authority. And so being able to let people talk about what doesn't feel right or whatever is a big task, right? And so I think number one for me is when I get to a point where there is psychological safety, where every level of the organization can give feedback and can talk to each other, can raise issues, our ability to whack-a-mole when you know the issues up front is so much easier than when people give it to you in exit interviews or you read about it online. So to me, number one is creating psychological safety on teams is number one success metric. The second thing for me is I am unabashed about my team making a lot of money. And what I mean by that is I'm in sales. And I think that people underestimate how good people feel when they see success in sales, when they crush their quotas. That gives them a swagger, gives them a confidence to take bigger risks. And success breeds success in sales. You know, you should see people's body languages when they bring in a deal. Like it's so reinforcing. And people want to be surrounded by other high performing people, right? And so they want to pick up their game. And so I always say, you know, my goal is that you make a lot of money, and for us not to be embarrassed about the fact that money motivates us in sales and marketing. And so I think that when I see more people on the team, and I don't mean one big hitter makes a lot of commission and nobody else makes money. I mean, like, it's a little bit like when you're playing gambling, and my sister always does this. She's one of the best blackjack players because she always celebrates when anybody beats the house. And she always says, you know, everybody wins, dealer goes bust. And so I always love this idea that everybody makes commissions, everybody wins, because it's so much more fun when everybody gets that check, right? And you get to do that. So I think that's the second one. And the third one for me is, you know, I don't see myself as a marketing leader or as a sales leader. I see myself as a business leader. And you see this on my LinkedIn, which is I really see myself, I work for companies where I believe in the culture and values of the company, whether it be IBM or LinkedIn or here. I feel very aligned with the culture of the company. And I want to be known as a culture champion of the company. And the ability to actually live the culture and values is very, very important. And so, you know, when we stay in JioSaavn's culture where people first, I want that to show up where people meet me, see me in action, see our cultures and say, yes, she works here. This is aligned. That authenticity and that alignment for me is so important, because otherwise it's just words on a paper. So I think those would be my 3 success metrics as a leader.
And the last thing I want you to talk about is you talked earlier about what your dad taught you about success. So tell us a little bit about that before we shift to the next section.
Yeah, you know, my dad, and unfortunately he passed away when I was 28, but, you know, we were first generation going to working, and he would always say, I'm never going to be right in front of you. I'm always going to be right behind you. And you know, I would have so much envy for some of my friends who had, now I know the word, helicopter parents. They would always be around. They would always fix things and sort it out. And my parents would be like, figure it out. Like, if it's really bad, we'll step in, figure it out. And I think this idea that for my team, I don't want to be in front of them, but I want them to know that I always have their back in case it goes awry. And just building their confidence is really what I hope to do. So always being right behind them, but not necessarily right in front of them.
Great. So now we get to the section where you get to ask me questions, stump me if you can section. So
I love it.
Ask me.
My favorite part. I've been waiting for this. So Lakshmi, I mean, the ability for you to build an entire life after seeing success, right?
Mm-hmm.
I meet a lot of people that they have seen success by the time they're 30, 35, but then they realize, or even 40 or 45, they realize like, wow, I have so many more years of active life left in me. What do I do now? So how did you navigate this idea of life after success for you? I mean, you've done so much, but that moment that you left Intel after 12 years, you'd already seen success. So how did you figure out?
Yeah. To me, I've learned also from my father, it's funny, we both talk about it, is that success is not a destination, but it's a journey, and success is not about you, it's about what you can do for others. And so I always felt, there are people who told me that don't ever make your passion your profession, because when you're professionally doing something, there's a lot of ups and downs, and even the one thing you love now has become a headache. But for me, I always felt the best measure of success for me would be doing what I love, my passion to be my profession, because then there's no end to it. It's not like this journey is over when this job is over. For me, it's a journey. So I feel whatever I'm doing with ink, I don't know if ink is sold tomorrow, I'll start pink or whatever it is. What I am doing is what I want to do. And so there is no end of I've been successful. Now, what do I want to do? This is what I want to do till I drop dead. I mean, there's just nothing else I can think of doing. So, to me, I guess success is, wanting to do whatever you're doing. And even with Intel, if I woke up in the morning and felt, oh my God, do I have to go do this? That's the day. I mean, I never let that day come. I always change jobs before that happened. So even within Inc, it's not like it's one company. What we do has changed, how we do it has changed, who is doing it has changed, and now I'm letting others do more, and I'm focusing more on, I want to have a talk show like this every day and not do anything else. So this is what I love doing. So I feel I design my life so success is just keep on doing whatever you're doing till I keep saying I want to be like Abdul Kalam, stand on stage someday talking, fall dead. That be success to me is till the last day do what I love doing and making some money doing it, not just for me, but for the whole team. I mean, what you said is very, very important. It has become very important to me. Coming from a very socialist father and a very, kind of a thing, I always used to think, oh, making money, it's like, it'll happen. Uh, Now I'm like, no, I want everyone in my team to be financially very, very successful. So that's what success is, making others successful and feeling like it's a journey. Then it's never ending.
I mean, it's amazing because along the way, not only have you kind of had this life after success, there are people who you've kind of brought out from, you know, I don't know where you find them, to be honest, but then they've made movies on them, and you've made so
Yeah.
so. We know about the folks that actually come on stage with ink. It's always been such a source of inspiration for me. Has
Yeah.
there been people that you wish you could actually bring their story out, but they have been reticent to let you or invite you into their space? Does that happen, or is everybody ready? You just need to find a way to.
Actually, that's people don't sometimes understand how great they are, actually, because when I tell them, hey, you should tell this story, a lot of times, especially in India and especially in Asia, oh, but what's such a big deal about this? Everybody does it. It's that there are times people are reticent to tell their story because they feel the story should be something like I made $1 billion, and somehow we've made success to be very, very wealth oriented but not contribution oriented. So a lot of times people say, what do I have to say about this? I'm like, oh my God, the way you're growing your garden is like so unique, you must tell how you came up with this idea. So I think we need to, as observers of people around us, it's our job to find the stories in whatever they're doing that may seem most ordinary, but make that really to show them how great they are. So otherwise, people are always looking for someone else who's great and not looking at themselves. So I think it's our job as storytellers to extract stories out of people and get them to tell the stories. It's not a journalistic thing of me telling that story. It's to make them get that limelight. And now my focus is I have done that for the world, and I realized that I need to do that more for my own team. So I said, I have a leadership team now. I want each of them to be out there speaking. I want each of them to become superstars. Otherwise, in the company, even a big company, you only know the CEO. You don't know who are one level below. So I think it's important to have multiple spokespersons for a company that are equally good. So you kind of say, oh my God, look at how many amazing speakers are there. So that's become my thing of my team members should be known more. While this kind of a talk show I do is what I do, but I want them to do other things so, people write about them and, they just become storytellers also.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my one question, because I think I can ask one more, and this is so much fun. I've never gotten to do this. Is you have always been a curator of stories from um, across functions, domains, countries. If you had to give an ink talk, and if you were an ink fellow, what would your talk be about?
Oh my God, that's a tough one. Um, I think I think it would always be about um, why it is important to stay positive no matter what. I think I'm fascinated about finding the story within you. We always look for inspiration from somewhere else, success from somewhere else, etc. But the real story is within you. I always, I think whatever I say, it doesn't matter to who, is about giving them the space to discover their story. And maybe really is about how we each need to be a different kind of a storyteller. A lot of times people confuse storyteller means you are the center stage, but storyteller is bringing the stories out in others. And maybe that's what my talk would be about, and how to create a world where you make it easy for others to see the story within themselves.
Yeah,
While
I
hopefully
mean,
they remember you, but the more important thing is they should discover that aha within themselves, and that's
which
what
is
story.
amazing, because your ability to be this amazing observer, listener, isn't that, I would say, coming back to the point of corporate skills, I think listening is every leader I know, barring a few, is sort of a terrible listener.
Yeah,
All of us, like, we're working on it every day, and they always say you should listen more. Uh, how do you force yourself to hear stories as you're trying to extract? You're so extroverted, you're so dynamic and inspirational yourself. How do you quieten yourself to hear?
I think part of what I do is the importance of balancing the quiet time with the talk time. I have to go for a walk for an hour or be quiet for an hour every day. I read a lot, which is a very inward focus thing. um, I just want to say that when I was in MBA program, I'm actually in Portland, Oregon right now, where I went to school. We are going over time, so I just want to excuse myself for a second, because I have to say this, is that because it just occurred to me, is my final thesis for my MBA program was a school I would start called Esperanto, which is a universal business language. And it would be to teach business leaders about theater, because I majored in theater with a minor in theater arts. And I wanted to, travel all over the world, work with the best leaders, and teach them how to be great uh, storytellers. I mean, that was my thesis for my MBA program. And full circle after all these decades, and that's really what I'm passionate about, because I feel corporations today are the biggest economies. And if I can influence large corporations, the leadership of large corporations, to think differently about what work means, what teams mean, if I can make them discover that, um, the matriarchal part of themselves, because I think business has become too patriarchal over time in terms of how we should work. Doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman, you're supposed to know everything, you're supposed to do all this, etc. But really, it's about saying, I don't know, teach me something, let's do it together. uh, it's a very, very matriarchal way of dealing with things. So to me, it's so interesting. As you asked this question, I was thinking that I'm in Portland, Oregon, and right now my passion is exactly what I said in my business graduation thesis, is what I wanted to do. So right now my passion is, I believe in the ripple effect. Either I can be known for a billion people, that a billion people know who Lakshmi is, or I work with 100 people who are the most influential, and billion people each know who they are, but I get to influence the way they think so they can create a better world. So that's what excites me, is to work with leaders like you and say, how can we make you more successful, because you can actually address a billion people, which I really I'm not good at. So it's very interesting. But anyway, we are running over time. So I really do want to say that the one thing, Virginia, I want to wrap up by saying that we have something called an ink tree seed moment, where we would like to plant a seed between us. Otherwise, we have this great conversation and we'll never talk to each other again. Never happens. But an idea that we can work together on, and I want to plant this seed in your head that all this talk show that we are doing right now, maybe, or some other talks we have, it'll be great if we can work with you to see how can we bring this onto the JioSaavn platform, and what can we do together. um, what do you think? What do you think about that idea?
I mean, I love the idea because I think that one of the things that's missing, I listened to several podcasts on work and the future work. I think Adam Grant has one, and there's a bunch of them. But I think that the context of Asia for me is missing from them. So it's a great opportunity to bring
Yeah.
some of your network, our network, because the JioSaavn audience is the most aspirational audience, right? 100 million, largely South Asian Indians. Given the education system and given the career coaching that's lacking, right? The soft skills. They always talk about soft skills, soft skills. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
soft skills, what you're talking about. And it
Yes.
needs to reach not just to your point about the 1,000 people that influence the next, which is, I think that more of India needs to see that. I mean, we were very lucky as people attending the Inc. conference, a few hundred of us that changed our lives, but we need to democratize this positivity. And I think that would be a great opportunity. So
So
I think we need
I
to
really look
make
forward
it
to that.
happen.
Let's do something together. And thank you so much for your time. And I just want to say, every time I talk to you, I walk away energized. And one of the blessings we all have in our lives is to have great conversations, positive conversations. So thank you for that. And we'll
Thank you for
talk
having
more.
me.
And thank you. I want to thank all the audience. Sorry we went a little over time, but it was a great conversation and I couldn't stop. And thank you so much for your time, everyone who's listening. Bye bye. Until next week.
Bye.